Hi, I'm James. I've always considered myself a straightforward guy, someone who values loyalty, trust, and the kind of love that you can count on no matter what. I've been married to my wife, Jennifer, for over a decade. We've known each other since high school, and in all those years, I never once doubted that we'd be together for the rest of our lives. I've always believed that infidelity was something that happened to other people, not to us. Jennifer and I built our life together with the idea that we were rock solid, that nothing could come between us. We had our routines, our shared dreams, and the comfort of knowing that we had each other's backs. It was the kind of marriage that you see in movies, where you just assume everything will work out because you're in it together. But here's the thing. Life has a way of throwing you curveballs when you least expect it. And when it happens, it hits hard. What I'm about to share with you is something I never thought would be a part of my story. It's something I always thought happened to someone else, but it happened to me. This isn't an easy story to tell, and it's even harder to live through. But I'm sharing it because I know there are others out there who might be facing the same fears, the same doubts, the same heartache. Maybe you've been there, or maybe you're worried you might be. Either way, I want you to know that you're not alone. My story is about discovering that the person you thought you knew better than anyone might have secrets that you never imagined. It's about confronting the reality that trust can be shattered in an instant, and trying to figure out what comes next when the foundation you've built your life on starts to crumble. So, I invite you to join me on this journey. It's not an easy one, but it's real. And maybe, through my experience, we can find some common ground, some understanding, and maybe even some hope. Looking back, it's almost painful how perfect everything seemed. Jennifer and I had what most people would call an ideal marriage. We weren't just husband and wife, we were best friends, partners in everything. We built our life together from the ground up, shared our dreams, celebrated our successes, and faced our challenges hand in hand. To everyone around us, we were the couple that had it all figured out. Every morning, I'd wake up next to her and feel this overwhelming sense of contentment, like I'd won the lottery in life. We had our rituals, our inside jokes, those little moments that made our relationship feel unshakable. Weekends were spent doing things we loved, taking long drives, laughing over breakfast, planning our future. I never once questioned that this was it. This was forever. I remember thinking how lucky I was, especially when I'd see friends or colleagues going through tough times in their relationships. They'd talk about arguments, distance, or even infidelity, and I'd sit there silently, grateful that Jennifer and I were different. We weren't perfect. No one is. But we were solid. We had trust, we had history, we had love. But here's the cruel irony. It's often when you're most confident, most certain that everything is exactly as it should be, that life decides to pull the rug out from under you. That's exactly what happened to me. I was so wrapped up in the belief that our marriage was untouchable that I didn't see the cracks forming right beneath my feet. We'd been together for so long that I thought I knew Jennifer better than anyone, better than she knew herself even. I could predict her every move, finish her sentences. I trusted her completely, without hesitation. So when those tiny, almost imperceptible changes started to happen, her staying up late, the way she'd pull her phone away when I walked into the room, I brushed them off. Why wouldn't I? This was Jennifer, my Jennifer, the woman who'd been by my side through everything. I didn't realize it then, but I was living in a bubble of blissful ignorance, blind to the storm that was brewing just out of sight. I told myself that any doubts I had were just paranoia, that our marriage was too strong to be shaken by something as trivial as a few late nights or secretive texts. But I was wrong, and when the truth finally came crashing down, it hit me harder than I ever could have imagined. Looking back now, it's almost hard to believe how easily I ignored the signs. At first, they were just little things, nothing that would have made me question the solid foundation Jennifer and I had built. But as they say, the devil is in the details, and those small, seemingly insignificant moments were the beginning of something much darker. It started with Jennifer staying up later than usual. We've always been pretty in sync when it comes to our routines, going to bed at the same time, talking about our day, just winding down together. But suddenly, she was staying up long after I went to bed. She said she was just catching up on some shows or reading, and I didn't think much of it. Why would I? I trusted her completely. Then there was the phone. I didn't even notice at first how she started holding onto it more, always having it within reach. But one night, I woke up in the middle of the night, and there she was, sitting on the edge of the bed, the glow of her phone illuminating her face. She quickly hid the screen when she saw me stir, muttering something about a work email. Again, I brushed it off. I mean, who gets suspicious over something like that? It was Jennifer. My Jennifer. She had no reason to hide anything from me, right? But the excuses started piling up. She was more distracted, not really present, when we were together. When I'd ask her what was going on, she'd laugh it off, saying she was just stressed with work or tired. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But there was this gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach, something I couldn't quite shake. The real turning point came when I caught a glimpse of her phone screen by accident. I was half asleep, heading to the bathroom, when I saw her quickly swipe something away. It was just a flash, but I could tell she was looking at pictures of herself, old ones from years ago. She quickly locked the phone, and when I asked her about it later, she brushed it off, saying she was just feeling nostalgic. But the way she avoided eye contact, the way her voice wavered ever so slightly, it planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't ignore. And then there was the group chat. Jennifer mentioned it in passing, how she had started playing this online game and joined a group chat with some of the other players. She made it sound harmless, just a way to pass the time. But something didn't sit right with me. Why was she suddenly so invested in this game, so connected to these strangers? My mind was racing, but I tried to push the thoughts away, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more that nagging feeling grew. It was like a splinter in my mind, something I couldn't get rid of no matter how hard I tried. I started to notice more things. The way she'd smile at her phone, the quick, hushed conversations she'd have when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I wanted to confront her, but every time I worked up the courage, I'd convince myself it was all in my head, that confronting her would just make me look like some insecure, paranoid fool. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it, and it was tearing me apart, not knowing what was really going on. The Jennifer I knew, the woman I loved, was slipping away, and I was powerless to stop it. I wish I could say that when the truth finally came out, it was something I was prepared for. But the reality is, no matter how many red flags you see, nothing truly prepares you for the moment when your worst fears are confirmed. It was one of those nights when Jennifer stayed up late again. I had gone to bed hours earlier, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind was racing, replaying all those little moments that didn't add up, those lingering doubts I couldn't shake. I knew something was wrong, but I hadn't wanted to face it. Not yet. But that night, something inside me snapped. I couldn't take the uncertainty any longer. I got up, determined to confront Jennifer once and for all. I walked into the living room, and there she was, curled up on the couch, her phone in hand. She didn't even hear me approach. "Jennifer," I said, my voice more steady than I felt. She looked up, startled, quickly locking her phone and putting it down. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Why are you staying up so late all the time? What's with the secrecy?" She hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she might just tell me the truth. But instead, she gave me that same tired excuse. Work, stress, nothing to worry about. But I wasn't buying it anymore. "Let me see your phone," I said, surprising even myself with how direct I was. Her reaction was immediate. Panic flashed in her eyes, and she pulled the phone closer to her. "James, come on, you don't need to do this," she said, her voice shaky. "There's nothing to see." But I wasn't backing down. "If there's nothing to see, then show me," I insisted. "What are you hiding, Jennifer?" She started to say something, but I cut her off. "Just let me see it," I repeated, holding out my hand. I could see the fear in her eyes, and that only made the dread in my stomach grow. She was hiding something, and it was worse than I had imagined. Reluctantly, she handed me the phone, but I noticed how she hesitated, how her fingers lingered over the screen, as if she could somehow erase whatever it was she didn't want me to see. When she finally handed it over, she had already opened a random app, trying to distract me. But I wasn't about to be distracted. I navigated to her messages, and that's when I saw it. The chat history with someone I didn't recognize. My heart was pounding in my chest as I scrolled through the messages, my worst fears materializing right in front of me. There it was, in black and white. Flirtatious messages, late-night conversations, inside jokes, things that she had never shared with me. And then I saw the name. Someone from that group chat she'd mentioned. A guy. The pit in my stomach grew deeper with every message I read. But the worst part, the part that broke me, was a message from Jennifer. She had sent him an old photo of herself. One of those cute pictures she had been looking at that night. I caught a glimpse of her phone. And with it, a message that was far too intimate for a married woman to be sending to anyone but her husband. I looked up at Jennifer, my hands trembling, the phone still clutched in my grip. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I fought them back. I needed answers. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me with this look of guilt and fear. And then, in a voice that was barely audible, she said, "It's not what you think, James. It was just a joke. It didn't mean anything." But her words felt hollow. How could this be a joke? How could something like this not mean anything? I felt a wave of anger rise up inside me, but it was quickly overtaken by an overwhelming sadness. This was the woman I loved, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, and she had betrayed me in a way I never thought possible. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, my voice breaking. She started to say something, but I could see the hesitation, the guilt. It wasn't just a few messages. It wasn't just a joke. This was something deeper, something that had been going on for a while. She finally broke down, tears streaming down her face, telling me how it started off innocently enough. Just a few messages in the group chat, a bit of teasing, and then it escalated. She admitted that she had become close to this guy, that she shared things with him that she hadn't even shared with me. And then she said something that shattered whatever was left of my heart. "I proposed to him, but it was just a joke, James, I swear." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of it all. How could she do this? How could she throw away everything we had for some meaningless online fling? I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The life I thought I had, the marriage I believed in, was gone. And in its place was a void, a darkness that I didn't know how to escape from. After that night, everything changed. It's hard to put into words what it feels like to have your entire world come crashing down around you. But that's exactly what happened. The days that followed were a blur of anger, confusion, and a sadness so deep that it felt like I was drowning in it. I couldn't look at Jennifer the same way anymore. Every time I saw her, all I could think about were those messages, those late-night conversations, that picture she sent to another man. I kept replaying it all in my mind, over and over, like some kind of cruel movie that I couldn't turn off. The woman I had loved and trusted for over a decade had betrayed me, and I couldn't escape that reality. I tried to go about my daily life, but nothing felt right. I'd be at work, trying to focus, but all I could think about was her, wondering if she was still talking to him, if there was more that she hadn't told me. My mind was constantly racing, filled with doubts and suspicions that wouldn't go away. And then there was the anger, this burning rage that I didn't know how to control. I'd find myself getting furious over the smallest things, snapping at people who didn't deserve it, all because I was so filled with this toxic mix of emotions that I couldn't keep it inside. But more than the anger, there was the pain. It was this deep, gnawing pain that wouldn't let up. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I'd been gutted. The life I thought I had, the marriage I believed in, had been ripped away from me, and all that was left was this emptiness. I kept asking myself how this had happened, how I hadn't seen the signs, and what I could have done to prevent it. But no matter how many times I went over it in my head, there were no answers that made it any easier to bear. And then there was the humiliation. I felt like a fool, like I had been played for a chump. Here I was, thinking that I had this perfect marriage, that Jennifer and I were solid, and all the while, she was sharing parts of herself with someone else. I started questioning everything, our entire relationship, the love we had shared, even my own worth. Was I not enough for her? Had I done something to push her away? These thoughts plagued me day and night, eating away at whatever self-esteem I had left. Jennifer tried to apologize, tried to explain herself, but I couldn't hear it. Every time she spoke, all I heard were the lies, the deceit, and it made me sick to my stomach. She would cry, begging for forgiveness, promising that it was just a mistake, that she loved me and only me. But how could I believe her? How could I ever trust her again after what she had done? The worst part was the loneliness. We still lived in the same house, but it felt like we were a million miles apart. I couldn't talk to her, couldn't even look at her, without feeling this overwhelming sense of betrayal. I felt like I was completely alone, even when she was right there next to me. The woman who had been my closest confidant, my partner, was now a stranger to me, and I didn't know how to bridge that gap. Every day was a struggle, just to get through. I was barely holding it together, trying to keep up appearances, but inside I was falling apart. The emotional toll was devastating, and I didn't know if I would ever recover. How do you come back from something like this? How do you rebuild your life when the person you thought you could trust more than anyone has ripped your heart out? I started to question everything. Not just my marriage, but myself. Who was I without Jennifer? What did my life mean if the foundation it was built on was a lie? The future that I had envisioned, the life we were supposed to have together, was gone, and I didn't know what to do with the pieces that were left. In those dark days, I realized that I was at a crossroads. I could let this destroy me, let the pain and anger consume me, or I could try to find a way forward. But how do you move forward when you're still drowning in the wreckage of your past? That was the question I couldn't escape, no matter how hard I tried. After the initial shock and heartbreak, I found myself at a loss. I didn't know what to do or where to turn. I was drowning in my own emotions, and I knew I couldn't get through this on my own. I needed help, needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of the mess my life had become. The first person I reached out to was my best friend, Mike. We've known each other since college, and he's always been the guy I could rely on, no matter what. When I called him and told him what had happened, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mike's not usually one to be at a loss for words, but I could tell he was just as shocked as I was. Finally, he said, "James, I'm so sorry, man. I can't believe this. What are you going to do?" That was the million-dollar question. What was I going to do? I told Mike that I had no idea, that I felt like my entire world had been turned upside down. He listened, letting me vent, and then he gave me the best advice he could. Don't make any decisions right now. You're hurt, you're angry, and that's not the time to make life-changing choices. Give yourself some time to process this before you do anything. It was good advice, but easier said than done. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to pack my bags and leave, to get as far away from Jennifer as possible. But another part of me couldn't imagine just walking away from everything we had built together. I felt like I was stuck in limbo, unable to move in any direction. I also talked to my sister, who's always been a voice of reason in my life. She was heartbroken for me and angry at Jennifer for what she had done. "You deserve better than this, James," she told me. "You deserve someone who values you, who respects you. You need to think about what's best for you, not just what's easiest." My sister's words hit me hard. I knew she was right, but the idea of starting over, of walking away from my marriage, was terrifying. It wasn't just about losing Jennifer. It was about losing the life we had built together. The thought of being alone, of not having her by my side, was almost too much to bear. But the more I talked to people, the more I realized that I couldn't make this decision in isolation. I needed different perspectives, different voices to help me see the situation clearly. I reached out to a few other close friends, people who knew both Jennifer and me, and their reactions were mixed. Some were shocked, others were angry, and a few were just as confused as I was. One of my friends, who had been through a similar situation years ago, told me something that really stuck with me. He said, "James, I know it feels like your world is ending right now, but you have to remember that this is just one chapter of your life. It's a painful chapter, no doubt, but it doesn't define your entire story. You have the power to decide how the rest of your story goes." That conversation gave me a lot to think about. It reminded me that I had a choice in this, that I wasn't just a passive victim of Jennifer's betrayal. I could choose how I wanted to respond, how I wanted to move forward, whether that meant staying and trying to rebuild our marriage, or walking away and starting fresh. But even with all the advice and support, I still felt lost. I decided to talk to a therapist, someone who could help me navigate the emotional minefield I was in. I've always believed in the importance of mental health, but I had never been in a situation where I felt I needed professional help. Now, it seemed like the only option. In therapy, I was able to unpack all the emotions I was feeling: the anger, the betrayal, the sadness, and yes, even the love that I still had for Jennifer. My therapist helped me see that what I was going through was a process, that there were no easy answers, and that it was okay to not have everything figured out right away. One of the hardest things I had to face was the realization that no matter what decision I made, it was going to hurt. There was no path forward that didn't involve pain, and that was a tough pill to swallow. But my therapist helped me understand that pain is a part of healing, that sometimes you have to go through the darkness to get to the light on the other side. Through all of this, I learned the importance of leaning on others, of not trying to shoulder everything on my own. I realized that it's okay to ask for help, to admit that you're struggling, and to let others support you when you need it. And most importantly, I learned that while this was a devastating chapter in my life, it wasn't the end of my story. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself trapped in this agonizing limbo. Every day felt like a battle between my heart and my mind. My heart, despite everything, still loved Jennifer. I had spent over a decade of my life with her, shared so many memories, and built a life together. But my mind kept reminding me of the betrayal, of the trust that had been shattered, and the deep wound that wouldn't heal. I kept replaying our conversations in my head, analyzing every word, every gesture, searching for some kind of answer. Jennifer was remorseful. There was no doubt about that. She cried, she apologized, she promised it was a mistake, and that she would do anything to make it right. But could I believe her? Could I really trust that this would never happen again? I knew I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I had to make a decision, and it was tearing me apart. On the one hand, there was the life we had built together, the history we shared, and the love that despite everything, I still felt for her. On the other hand, there was the betrayal, the lies, and the fear that even if I forgave her, things would never be the same again. The thought of leaving terrified me. It wasn't just about leaving Jennifer, it was about walking away from everything we had built together. The house, the routines, the life we had created. It all felt like it would be gone in an instant if I decided to leave. And then there was the fear of the unknown. What would my life look like without her? Would I be able to start over? Would I ever be able to trust someone again? But staying wasn't an easy choice either. I couldn't imagine living with the constant doubt, the fear that she might betray me again. Every time she picked up her phone, every time she stayed out late, I knew I would be questioning her, wondering if she was hiding something. Could I live like that? Could I ever truly forgive her and move on? Or would the pain and resentment eventually destroy us both? I tried to weigh the pros and cons, tried to think logically about what was best for me. But logic didn't seem to help. My emotions were all over the place, and every time I thought I had made a decision, something would happen to make me doubt it. One moment, I was ready to pack my bags and leave, convinced that there was no way to rebuild the trust that had been broken. The next, I was telling myself that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to make it work. I remember one night, lying in bed next to Jennifer, both of us staring at the ceiling, not saying a word. The silence between us was deafening. It was in that silence that I realized how far apart we had drifted. The connection we once had, the easy conversation, the comfort of just being together, it was all gone, replaced by this heavy, oppressive silence. That night, I finally confronted the question head-on. Was I staying because I still loved her, or was I staying because I was afraid to leave? It was a hard question to answer, and the truth was, it was probably a bit of both. But I knew I couldn't make a decision based on fear. If I stayed, it had to be because I truly believed we could rebuild, that we could find a way to trust each other again. And if I left, it had to be because I believed it was the best thing for both of us, not because I was running away from the pain. I decided to take some time away, to clear my head and think without the constant presence of Jennifer's pain and remorse. I spent a few days at a friend's place, away from the house, away from the memories, just to give myself some space to breathe. It was during those days that I did a lot of soul-searching, trying to figure out what I really wanted, what I needed to do for myself. But in the end, it came down to one simple question. Could I ever trust Jennifer again? Could I look at her and not see the betrayal? Could I forgive her, not just in words, but in my heart? And the answer, as painful as it was to admit, was no. I realized that every time I looked at her, I would be reminded of what she did. Every argument, every moment of doubt would bring it all rushing back. And that wasn't fair to either of us. I loved Jennifer, but I knew that staying would only prolong the pain for both of us. It wouldn't be fair to her or to me. We both deserved a chance to heal, to move on, even if that meant doing it separately. It was the hardest decision I've ever had to make, but I knew it was the right one. When I told Jennifer, it was one of the most painful conversations I've ever had. She cried, begged me to reconsider, promised she would do anything to make it right. But I knew in my heart that staying would only lead to more pain, more resentment. We both needed to heal, and that wasn't going to happen if we stayed together. So I made the decision to leave. It was devastating, and the pain was overwhelming. But deep down, I knew it was the right thing to do. I had to let go of the life we had planned together, the future I thought we would share. After making the decision to leave, I found myself standing at the edge of an unknown future. It was terrifying. The life I had known for over a decade was gone, and I was stepping into a new chapter, one that I hadn't planned for or even wanted. But despite the fear, there was also a strange sense of relief, a weight lifted, as if I could finally breathe again. The decision had been made, and now it was time to figure out how to move forward. The first few weeks were the hardest. I felt like a ship adrift at sea. No anchor, no direction. The house felt empty, echoing with memories of a life that no longer existed. The silence was deafening. I had to confront the reality that I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in years. But I knew that wallowing in that emptiness wouldn't help. I had to find a way to rebuild, to find strength within myself that I didn't know I had. I started with small steps, focusing on the basics, getting out of bed, going to work, trying to eat properly. It sounds simple, but in those early days, even the smallest tasks felt monumental. I forced myself to establish a new routine, something to give my days structure and purpose. I started going for long walks, using the time to clear my head and sort through the jumble of emotions that still lingered. But the real turning point came when I decided to focus on myself, something I hadn't done in a long time. I realized that for years, my identity had been so tied up in my marriage, in being Jennifer's husband, that I had lost sight of who I was outside of that role. It was time to rediscover myself, to figure out who James really was, not just as a husband, but as a man. I started going to the gym again, something I had let slip over the years. At first, it was just about getting out of the house, but soon it became more than that. It became a way to channel my anger, my frustration, my sadness. Each weight I lifted, each mile I ran, was like shedding a layer of pain. Slowly, I started to feel stronger, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too. I also took up new hobbies, things I had always wanted to do but never had the time or energy for. I signed up for a cooking class, something that had always intrigued me but seemed too daunting. It turned out to be one of the best decisions I made. There was something incredibly therapeutic about creating something from scratch, about focusing on the simple, tactile process of cooking. It became a way for me to reconnect with myself, to find joy in something new. But the most important part of my rebuilding process was reconnecting with the people in my life. I had isolated myself during those dark days, pushing away friends and family because I was ashamed, because I didn't want to burden them with my pain. But I realized that I couldn't do this alone. I needed support, needed to let people back in. I started spending more time with friends, rekindling old relationships that had fallen by the wayside. I opened up to them in a way I hadn't before, sharing my pain, my fears, my hopes for the future. And in return, they gave me the support and encouragement I needed to keep going. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I had people who cared about me, who wanted to see me happy again. Through all of this, I began to see that my life wasn't over. Yes, it was different, drastically different, but it wasn't the end. It was a new beginning, a chance to redefine myself and what I wanted out of life. I started setting new goals, both big and small, things I wanted to achieve, experiences I wanted to have, places I wanted to go. It gave me something to look forward to, something to work towards. One of the most surprising things I discovered during this time was that I was stronger than I had ever realized. I had been through hell, but I had come out the other side. I wasn't the same person I was before, and in some ways, that was a good thing. The pain, the betrayal, had stripped away the illusions I had about my life, but it had also revealed a core of resilience that I didn't know I had. It wasn't an easy process. There were days when I felt like I was moving backward, when the sadness and loneliness threatened to pull me under again. But each time, I picked myself back up and kept moving forward, one step at a time. And with each step, I found a little more strength, a little more hope. Eventually, I started to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. I was rebuilding my life, piece by piece, and while it didn't look like the life I had imagined, it was still mine. And in some ways, it was better because it was built on a foundation of honesty, of self-awareness, and of strength. And as I continued to rebuild, I discovered something else: peace. It didn't come all at once, but gradually I started to feel a sense of calm, of acceptance. I had been through one of the hardest experiences of my life, but I had survived. And now I was ready to see what the future held. As time went on, I found myself in a place I never thought I'd be again, ready to open my heart to someone new. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, and honestly, it took me by surprise. After everything I had been through, the idea of trusting someone again, of being vulnerable, seemed almost impossible. But as I continued to rebuild my life, I realized that part of moving forward was allowing myself to believe in love again. I wasn't actively looking for a new relationship. In fact, I was content with the idea of being on my own for a while, focusing on myself and my goals. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. That's how I met Melissa. We crossed paths in the most unexpected way. It wasn't some grand romantic meeting, just a casual encounter through mutual friends. We were both at a small gathering, and there was something about her that caught my attention right away. She had this warmth, this genuine kindness that drew people to her. We started talking, just light conversation at first, but there was an ease between us that I hadn't felt in a long time. As the evening went on, I found myself opening up to her in a way that surprised even me. We talked about everything, our lives, our interests, even some of the challenges we had faced. There was something comforting about her presence, something that made me feel like I could be myself without any pretenses. Over the next few weeks, we continued to see each other just as friends at first. But the more time we spent together, the more I realized that there was something special about Melissa. She was different from anyone I had ever met. Honest, compassionate, and real. There was no pretense with her, no games. She was simply herself, and that was enough. But even as I started to develop feelings for her, there was a part of me that was terrified. I had been hurt so deeply before, and the thought of going through that kind of pain again was almost paralyzing. I kept asking myself if I was really ready for this, if I could truly open up to someone new without the fear of being hurt again. Melissa must have sensed my hesitation, because one day she sat me down and said, "James, I know you've been through a lot, and I can't imagine how hard it must be for you to trust again. But I want you to know that I'm here for you, and I'm not going anywhere. We can take this as slow as you need, but I want you to know that I'm not going to hurt you." Her words struck a chord with me. For the first time, I felt like someone truly understood what I had been through, and that meant more to me than anything. I realized that if I was going to move forward, I had to let go of the fear that was holding me back. I had to take a chance, not just on Melissa, but on myself, on the possibility that I could find happiness again. So I took that chance. We started seeing each other more often, and slowly I let my guard down. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the old fears would creep in. But Melissa was patient, understanding. She never pressured me, never pushed me beyond what I was comfortable with. Instead, she was simply there, steady and supportive, letting me set the pace. As our relationship grew, I found myself healing in ways I hadn't expected. Melissa helped me see that what happened in the past didn't have to define my future. She showed me that it was okay to be vulnerable, to trust again, and that doing so didn't make me weak, it made me stronger. For the first time in a long time, I started to feel genuinely happy again. Melissa and I built something together that was rooted in honesty, respect, and mutual support. It wasn't perfect, no relationship is, but it was real, and that's what mattered. I also learned that it was possible to love again without forgetting the past. My experience with Jennifer would always be a part of me, but it didn't have to control me. Melissa understood that, and she never tried to erase what had happened or pretend that it didn't matter. Instead, she accepted it as part of who I was, and that acceptance allowed me to move forward in a way I never thought possible. Meeting Melissa was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter that I hadn't planned for, but one that I was incredibly grateful for. She helped me see that there is life after heartbreak, that there is love after loss. And while the scars of the past will always be there, they don't have to keep me from embracing the future. In Melissa, I found not just a partner, but a friend. Someone who saw me for who I was and loved me anyway. And in loving her, I found a new sense of purpose, a new sense of hope. This new chapter wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building something new, something beautiful, on the foundation of everything I had learned. As I sit here reflecting on everything that's happened, I can't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. for the journey, the lessons, and the strength I discovered within myself. It hasn't been an easy road, but it's one that's led me to a place of peace and acceptance that I never thought I'd find. Looking back, there was a time when I believed my life was over, that the pain of betrayal would consume me and leave me broken beyond repair. But what I've learned is that even in our darkest moments, there's always a path forward, even if we can't see it at first. It's a path that requires us to confront our fears, to face our pain head-on, and to make choices that are often incredibly difficult. But it's also a path that leads to growth, to healing, and to a new understanding of who we are. My journey with Jennifer taught me many things about love, trust, and the fragility of the bonds we form with others. It showed me that even the strongest relationships can be tested, and that sometimes, despite our best efforts, they may not survive. But it also taught me that our value isn't defined by the actions of others, and that we have the power to rebuild, to start over, and to find happiness again. Meeting Melissa was a reminder that life doesn't end with heartbreak. It continues, often in ways we never expected. She helped me see that it's possible to love again, to trust again, and to open myself up to new possibilities. And while the scars of the past will always be a part of me, they don't define my future. They're simply a reminder of where I've been and how far I've come. If there's one thing I hope you take away from my story, it's that no matter what you're going through, you're stronger than you think. The pain, the fear, the uncertainty, they're all part of the process, but they don't have to control you. You have the power to choose how you respond, to decide what kind of life you want to build, even after everything falls apart. I've learned that forgiveness, both of others and of ourselves, is a powerful thing. It doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what's happened, but it does mean letting go of the anger and bitterness that can keep us trapped in the past. It means allowing ourselves to heal, to move on, and to find peace. As I continue this journey, I know there will be challenges ahead. There always are. But I also know that I'm capable of facing them, that I have the tools and the strength to navigate whatever comes my way. And most importantly, I know that I'm not alone. I have people in my life who support me, who love me, and who remind me every day that I'm worth fighting for. So, as I close this chapter and look to the future, I do so with a sense of hope and optimism. Life may not always go according to plan, but it has a way of leading us exactly where we need to be. And for that, I'm grateful. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. I hope it's brought you some comfort, some perspective, and maybe even a little bit of hope. If you're going through something similar, know that you're not alone and that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, even if it feels far away right now. Remember, it's not the end of your story. It's just a new chapter, and you have the power to decide how it's written.